How's it going, guys? So my name is Rahel Razak, and today I'm going to give you some example of advanced phrases for presenting in English. First, let's start by welcoming your audience. For example, you can use, "It's lovely to see so many familiar faces here today." Or you can use, "I'm very grateful to you all for taking the time to be here today." Next is introducing yourself. You can use, "For those of you who don't know me, I'm," or you can use, "Let me start by telling you a little bit about my own background. I'm." And now, let's take a look at some different ways to talk about the goal or the objective of your presentation and why it's relevant for your audience. Stating the goal of your presentation. You can use, "What I intend or plan or hope to do is," or you can use, "The reason I'm here today is to talk about," or you can use the less formal one, which is, "I'm here to say a few words about," explaining why the topic is relevant. You can use, "This talk should be of particular interest to those of you who," or, "By the end of this afternoon's talk, you'll know how to," or "You'll be familiar with," or you can use, "What I hope you'll get from my talk or presentation is a clearer view or better idea of." Next is the signposting phrases. These are the phrases you use to guide your audience through your presentation. Introducing the first topic. You can use, "I'd like to begin by drawing your attention to," or "Let's begin by looking at." Finishing a topic. You can use, "That's all I want to say about this topic for the time being," or "So that's the background on." Continuing with another topic. You can use, "The next point I'd like to talk about is," or you can use, "This leads me directly to my next point, which is." Most of the time, we need to highlight information during a presentation. So to emphasize something or to mention how important it is, let's take a look at some phrases you can use. Highlighting information. As far as I'm concerned, the main issue here is, or "The significance of this is," or "I cannot emphasize this strongly enough." Sometimes it is important to paraphrase. So if you think the audience hasn't understood the point that you're trying to make, try using a simpler language. Here are some examples of phrases you can use. For paraphrasing, you can use, "In other words," or "To put simply," or "To put it another way." Now, let's take a look at some phrases we can use to talk about common knowledge, so referring to things that your audience knows. And we'll also take a look at some phrases here you can use to refer to things that you've already mentioned earlier in your presentation. Common knowledge. You can use, "As you're all aware," or "As I'm sure you all know," referring to points you mentioned earlier. You can use, "If you remember, I touched upon this point earlier," or "As I mentioned or I pointed out earlier." And sometimes we digress, which means to talk about something that is different from the main topic. Digressing. You can use, "While we're on the subject of, I'd like to briefly mention," or "If I can just digress for a moment." Getting back to the topic, we can use, "Coming back to the main point," or "Getting back to my main point." And finally, we'll take a look at some different ways to end the presentation. Summarizing, we can use, "Finally, let me remind you of the main points we covered, or looked at, or considered today." Or, "Let me briefly summarize the main points." In some presentation, it can be very effective to finish with a famous quote. Here's one way to do it. "I'd like to finish with something," then include the name of the well-known person once said, and then include the quote. Then another way to conclude is, "Let me just finish with a question," and then include the thought-provoking question. Thanking the audience and inviting them to ask questions. You can use, Thank you very much for being such an attentive audience. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Or you can use a very informal way, which is any questions? Only use this if you have an informal relationship with your audience and you know them well. Alright everyone, so that's the end of the video. I really hope you found it helpful, and thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.